Hi everyone, welcome to the Verkos show. Today's guest is a music writer, producer, he's a singer, he's a radio show host, and he's also an author. And I'm so blessed to have him on the show because he's all the way from the UK. He's our first guest in 2022 on the Verkos show all the way from the UK. Please welcome Dar Ra. Dar Ra, how are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an absolute pleasure.
I thank you and I appreciate you, and I'm sending you so much love, and I appreciate you so much.
Nice digging.
Okay, Dara, well, we've been talking, and I thank God for Alexitina for introducing us and connecting us, because when we were talking, there was a sentence that was instilling me that you said, and I'll read it out. I don't want to get any words wrong here. It's limit your desire, you limit your suffering. Oh my gosh, how impacting is that sentence? Limit your desire, you limit your suffering. When did this come about in your life, this sentence?
So when I was about 17 years old, which was about a year ago, no, when I was about 17, I was lucky enough to meet a guy who's just got that one. Where I met a guy who happened to be sort of living in the same road as where my mother lived, and we were both doing our cars up. He happened to be a little bit older than me, and one day I just sort of, we were talking about kind of, you know, how you do this with changing a carburetor, and I out of the blue just said, "Do you know anything about Tibetan Buddhism?" It was just random, do you know what I mean? For a 17-year-old kid to sort of ask a 30-year-old guy. And he said, "Wow, it just so happens," do you know what I mean? I kind of, you know, I have been reading a bit about, you know, and he said, like, pop over for a cuppa, and I did. And when I walked into his place, he was a DJ as well, and he just had an array of like really cool books and just like stacks of records. And I just thought, wow, I'm in here. So he gave me a book called The Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I read and tried to understand at that age of my experience, as it were. And then, you know, there was a that line particularly stood out for me, and we used to sort of then kind of go back, and we'd have these like discussions and stuff. And I remember sort of just kind of getting a grounding with that at a very early age, kind of like that. If you sort of limit the things that you're kind of desiring, you know, that actually it's that desire that creates the pain. And if you limit that desire to a degree, you limit the pain. But that doesn't mean that you should just completely sort of like abandon your ambition. It's having a balance, so you don't buy into materialism that it becomes your god. That's really what that's about. So, because everything is we've already talked about the transience of kind of life. You know, everything's moving and changing, and you know, it's just seeing through the illusions that actually having a brand new car, Lamborghini, is going to make you feel good, no doubt about it, but it's not going to fill the void. Fame, you know, fame's not going to fill the void. Having a #1 record, I've had #1 records, do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't change the pain. The pain's still there. You've got to change the pain. You've got to go in there and deal with the traumas. Otherwise, the trauma is going to be there when you've got your mansion and your $1 billion, whatever it is, your view, your this, that, and the other, and suddenly you're not appreciating it anymore because you don't sort of value yourself. You value the material side of it. And then you'll watch actually a lot of that sort of those success stories go up and they go down very quickly because the void has not been dealt with. They haven't dealt with the fundamentals. And to just kind of, I'm going to give you a really big one here, right? This is a massive thing, actually. Funny enough, we're talking about things that come up this week for me. And this came up for me. That 95% of the world's population is suffering from childhood trauma, right? And that childhood trauma carries on all the way through our lives, and it breaks us being in the present, right? And it stops us from it. And most people are so switched off that they don't realize that they've been affected by what certain events that had happened in our very, very fragile period of growing. The way the brain is structured, it records all these events, and unfortunately the subconscious is a fragile thing. and it will replay those negative events all the way through. So then you feel, you know, you're not worthy, or you're, you know, you create, like, you know, we talk about law of attraction, and you create what you feel, or what. So if you're feeling kind of like that you're not good enough, what are you going to get back? You're going to get people validating your feeling of not being good enough, right? So that's massive. So 95% of the world is suffering still in adulthood, and to the point where people pass on, they're still carrying those childhood traumas, right? And here's where it gets even more interesting. We're also suffering from cosmic abandonment at times as well. So, you know, we've talked about, I know you've got your faith, but at times we sort of look into the sky and we ask ourselves, why? Why has this world been abandoned by this thing called God? So then we have this cosmic abandonment. So we've got actual real kind of like trauma, you know, from a family abandonment and whatever it was that happened. And then we have cosmic abandonment. And then you look at people in the shopping mall and you wonder why people are lost. Huge, absolutely huge. So those two things are what causes people the most suffering. Because the reason that again sort of we put materialism in place of dealing with the issues is because we think that's a short-term fix. So we're going to go out, we're going to buy a car, we're going to buy a new car that we think is going to get us kudos with whoever it is that we're trying to impress. You know, or we're gonna go out and buy a brand new whatever it is is shiny for a minute, and you see people coming back shopping, you know, with all these bags, and I, you know, I say you go to London and you go to Knightsbridge and you see all these very super rich people wandering about with all these named bags. You know it in Sydney, you know, you go down to, you know, certain places in Sydney and you see the super rich down in, I don't know, you know, whatever bay it is that they are in, you know,
Double Bay.
Places where you've got the super rich and they're all waddling about with these bags, and I always look at them and just go, as soon as you put those bags in the wardrobe, that's going to be the end of it. You had the hit. The rush was you handing the card over and buying things that you actually just didn't need, and then actually you think that's going to keep you happy, but it just doesn't, you know. And I've all the way
for a short period of time. It's only for a short period of time you feel that joy and happiness, and then, like you said, you put it in the cupboard and there it's gone, done. Okay, exactly. What next? So you're always searching outside of yourself for your happiness instead of finding it within. And this is what the change is happening in the world today, and making people aware is to find that happiness within.
Exactly. But it's easier said than done. It's easier said than done because, again, the subconscious is a slippery bug. It's a slippery little thing. It thinks
it's a conscious choice.
It's not a conscious choice. That's exactly what it is, and it's a non-conscious choice, because basically the subconscious is being programmed negatively, and it thinks it's protecting you. So it wants to keep you in that comfort zone. So if you've manifested an abusive relationship, you'll notice that people don't get out of those cycles because they think that's what they deserve, because that's what they got before. Do you understand me? Because it's not consciously sitting there going like, you know, please hit me or please abuse me. Their subconscious is going, yeah, but this is what you deserve. This is what you think. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, this is the circle.
But us as humans, we have to make a conscious choice of seeing it for what it is and say, you know what? No, I'm not tolerating that. No, I'm not putting up with that. No, I'm walking away from that.
Of course, and that's the conscious movement that actually makes the change. But a lot of people can't make that movement because they're so far into the trip that they think that's real. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Because they're not walking in the same circles we're walking in. You know, we might be in a slightly more with half an eye open, but a lot of people, and I'm not trying to, you know, I'm there to help those people who are stuck in those grooves, because I'm stuck in my little circle that I'm dealing with, but you know, I look at other people who are stuck in even worse positions. So like, for instance, here's the thing, right? I won't go into huge details, but I do practice what they call NLP. Somebody came over here for a business meeting the other day, lovely lady, who said to me, I am feeling anxiety in certain situations, you know, particularly with somebody who was being verbally abusive to her in a business situation. And I said, can I just stop you? Would you mind if I just explored that a little bit with you? Because I do this NLP, right? It's hypnotherapy and using language. And she said, yeah, sure. And we did a 15-minute session, and I took her all the way back to when she was kind of like young, and she was in an abusive situation. She didn't know that before. So she's now, as a 40-year-old woman, in a business situation being dictated to by someone who's using their force, and she's now feeling that anxiety and feeling on the back foot that she can't protect herself in the way that she should be able to, because she's carrying a trauma that she didn't realize. Do you understand me? She was unconscious that that trauma had gone back all the way to when she was a baby, and there was a negative role model in that space who was creating a vibration towards them, whatever it was. I'm not going to give huge details here, but was creating a situation where that child was taking on anxiety due to an abusive, toxic situation. But that was so buried deep, all right, and it takes somebody with a slight bit of sort of understanding to be able to get in there and go, do you realize now she's conscious of it, now she can do something about it, right? There's a big difference between sort of like, yes, I know, because I can stand in front of the mirror and go, you're still carrying out that trauma, mate. You're still doing it. You're still doing it. At least I'm aware, right? When somebody out in the field, right, or somebody cuts you up or somebody rips you off in business, they're not aware half the time of what they're doing, because if they were aware, they wouldn't do it. Yeah, they wouldn't do it, because it's a lot easier for me to share my whatever I've got and we move forward as a whole than go, you're not getting any of that. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm having it all, because I obviously had scarcity when I was a child, and it meant me having to have that grab me mentality. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what you're witnessing when you step out the door. You're witnessing a whole world of people who are not conscious of their trauma. That's what I'm saying. It's not, and that's why the world's in the mess that it is, because unfortunately the human mechanism of the mind is fragile. It's not strong in terms of sort of what it, if you're exposed to negative vibrations at any age, you'll remember, like, so for instance, if I did a gig, when was this the other day? I did a gig, right? I'm not going to go into details here. And someone came up and fronted me on while I was playing and got really abusive and really in my face about this situation, right? I'm not going to go into details. It was bang out of order, and it took me off my center, and it took me a while to get back in there. And even though by the end of the gig I had literally 98% of the people really loving what I was doing, what stayed in my mind when I got back to my hotel? That one negative event. Because the mind is kind of going, it locks into the negative rather than the overall positive. And that's the way the mind is wired up, because we're looking, it's a survival. The brain is wired up for survival. So when it sees that negative thing comes in, it's the threat of somebody attacking you that you focus on. Even though it was a 98% positive situation, you're still focusing, because the mind is tuned in to register when there's a negative. So if you're tuning into that one thing, it means that you're not allowing the great experience. You're missing the great experience by basically, and it's not our fault as human beings. This is what I'm trying to say. It's not our fault. It's the way the mind is designed to kind of completely kind of be in comfort zones, and also sort of like for survival. And unfortunately, as I said, when you sort of absorb certain things as a child in that trauma, becomes like the norm. That becomes the norm. So you recreate that toxic situation. So if you had a toxic father, you might marry a toxic male, because that's what that's what your subconscious is law of attraction. That's what it's putting out. And then you get into that horrible thing that you think, well, this is my life. This is what. Here's another thing that people do. People want to hold on to that overcoat of negativity. I've met other people where I'm going, I could really help you get rid of that. And they're like, no, because it's part of me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, they're frightened to take the overcoat off, because they might think, actually, what's left? Who's me? So
yeah, you got to be ready for these changes, and you got to choose to make these changes within yourself. Because I know I've gone through my stuff, and it was like you said, it was past trauma. It was from when I was a kid. Everything I had to learn to deal with it. I had to isolate myself for a few years from even the world to find out who I am, to be able to be where I am today. And it's a lot of internal work that you have to. It has to come from with you, and you've got to want it. You've got to seek it, and you've got to want it to come on top of it. So, yeah, that's.
If you're looking for the reason why the world's in the mess that it is because a lot of people are unaware of what's going on in the deep subconscious programming.
Yeah.
So that's the issue. That's it. Hey, listen, right? Jesus Christ was crucified, right? Listen, Jesus Christ was crucified possibly 2,000 years ago. You know, look at what the people at that event chose. They had Barabbas on one side. They had another criminal on the other side, and they had the most amazing man that was ever born in the middle, and they chose Barabbas. How far have we come since that event? Not very, because actually human beings are inherently do not want to learn from mistakes that have been made. It's almost like a goldfish mind, where literally they will forget, you know, they will forget what happened last week, let alone what happened 2,000 years ago, because there's.
But I do believe there is a turn now. I think there's more people seeking now the truth. That's how I feel. I think there's more of us coming together in seeking the truth.
I do think you're right, but here's the thing, right? So, for instance, right, you'll have here's a little example. So you'll have a general election, all right, and there'll be a voting, right, and the party that had been in before got voted in, and everybody basically, by the time they ended up, were absolutely couldn't wait to get rid of them. But they forget that the party that was in before were just as bad, right? And they think the party that was in before is going to now be something different, and therefore they vote this new thing that creates the same thing that they had 20 years ago. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now they're going to go, oh, Labour, 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 Labour. I'm like, are you a goldfish? Are you a goldfish? Did you not remember what they did to us like 20 years ago? You honestly think that because they changed the faces have changed, the policies haven't, but your memory hasn't changed. Your memory has neglected to remember what. See, that's what I'm trying to say. Example of human beings that give up their whole entire, you know, their faith goes to these people. You know, understand what I'm saying? And they put their faith in these people with these ties and these kind of like supposed ideologies. And actually, just goes to show you that people do forget very, very quickly. You know, we had a Labour government in here in 2000 that took us to war and destroyed the Middle East. Absolutely. And no one has been held accountable for that. Right? No one's been held accountable for the destruction of Afghanistan and the destruction of Iraq. No one's been held accountable for that. Do you understand me? But yet now, because the Tories have done such a terrible, terrible job, they think that this other Labour are going to come back in and somehow do something different. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? That's where I'm going. We really need to wake up very quickly, not just a few of us, but everyone needs to wake up and go, these people are not our friends. They're not there to serve us. You know what I mean? And until we...
But I think this time on Earth, I think it is a great awakening, and I think people are more aware. That's why we're all coming together. I believe, anyway, what I see in my world, I see we're all coming together. There's more of us and more of us. We're thinking outside the box now, even in everything that we're doing, which is fantastic. I think it's a blessing. Like me, example, I was supposed to go overseas to do my show in America, and I said no. Or because I didn't get the, you know what. So they said, no shot, no show. So I thought, well, I've got to be true to myself. I'm not going to get it. So I had to start creating my show on my own. And that, sorry?
I said, I totally agree. You know, we you know, there are more. I mean, I came through sort of like the whole, you know, the sort of alternative scenes of the sort of like the 90s, where there was a small kind of group of people that were talking on this level. And, you know, you can, if you mention the word karma, for instance, in public, people would just like look at you as if you were from outer space. I remember that I was a vegetarian at 17 as well. And I remember going to America in 2000 doing some shows, and people looked at me like when I said I was a vegetarian. I literally, somebody said to me who was looking after me, goes, oh, you know, what do you want to eat? And I was like, oh, what vegetarian food have you got? And they said, what? You know, what? And I said, what vegetarian? He said, vegetarian? He said, what is that? You know, and it was when I explained, he goes, are you a communist as well? You know, that's, are you a communist as well?
That was the mentality back then.
I just don't want to eat meat.
Yeah, that was the mentality back then. Yeah, that was the mentality back then as well. But now it's so open to all that. I remember I was a vegetarian for one whole year.
I remember coming to Australia,
Good
right?
challenge, but it was good.
I used to
Yeah,
get
I did it
ribbed.
for 1 year. I went back.
I got ribbed in
Sorry?
Australia. I got properly ribbed out in Australia for being a vegetarian. Every time we went to a barbecue, they were like, "What do you mean you don't eat meat, mate?" I was like, "I don't eat meat." He goes, "Well, what are you going to have then? Like, what do you want to do? Put some grass on the barbie?" You know, I literally I just get ribbed out. You're like, "No, man, I don't. I won't bother eating." He's like, "Just get some snags down you, mate. Get some snags down you." And I'd be like, "No, it's all right, dude. You know what I mean?" So, do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, but you're quite a
when people
while here in
to me,
Australia. You're quite a while here in Australia.
sorry, I didn't hear the question.
You were quite a while here in Australia. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
having a little bit of connection problem.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you were quite a while here. You did a lot. You did a lot of work here, and you
I
worked
did.
with magicians. Sorry, musicians.
That
You
was
did a
some.
lot here, which was good.
Yeah, man. I was in Australia from about 96 to 98, I think it was, and then I went back. Came back to the UK, did a bit of a tour of America and the Middle East and various different spots. And then I came back to Australia 2001 to 2003. First time I was working in Sydney for Festival Records and BMG Records. I was working out of a studio in Surrey Hills and Newtown. Yeah, man, Surrey Hills was
Oh
cool.
my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where else? And I had a flat down in oh God, but I had a flat in
Darlinghurst or the Darlinghurst?
yeah, and Bondi as well. I had a flat in Bondi as well. I like Bondi. Bondi was cool,
Okay.
man. Like Bondi in the 90s was
Yeah,
cool, right? It was cool, like you
it
know what I mean.
was.
Loads of
It
parties.
still is. It still is.
I haven't been.
It
I
still
haven't.
is Bondi. Very popular.
Yeah, we used to party hard, man, in Sydney at that point. We were like, we were. I was quite rare when I was there because the dance thing was just starting to really kind of like take a hold. So there wasn't as many kind of DJs and sort of remixes about. So I was getting a lot of work remixing stuff. I was getting like bands like Tears for Fears. I got Frankie Goes to Hollywood. I did Hunters and Collectors, John Stevens. I did Savage Garden and various other kind of stuff. I also had I had a top 40 with a band called Ultra Love Machine, Sonia Shiramin on Festival Records with a track called Central Wonderland. And, yeah, I was busy. And then I went back and I worked with the Gong family up in Byron, who had like David Allen was an amazing Australian guitar maverick hero. He was in Soft Machine. They toured with Jimi Hendrix in the late 60s, and they were the first band to ever get signed to Virgin. Gong are over in Europe and America are just humongous, you know what I mean? And I got to work with David, and I worked with Orlando Allen, who's an amazing producer in his own right. And we did a chakra album, amazing Kundalini record, which was, again, 15, 20 years before its time, where
My
we were
goodness.
using breath and frequencies to create well-being, shall we say. And we used archetypes from base chakra all the way up to the crown. And we just had an amazing 18 months making that record in Byron Bay. One of the greatest experiences. And again, sort of what a journey that was from the base to the crown. We went through so many different situations. Every time we were working on a zone, all those things that were connected were coming up for us, you know what I mean? So working on a base chakra initially, and we were opting for very sort of African djembe, dunga daga da dunga da, for real grounding in, and then you add a breath with that, right? So you'd have djembe going with this breath exercise, which would be like, and you're doing that over a sort of a period of time, and you really get that grounding in. Boom, badaka, da, boom, badaka. So it's really working for. But base chakra is obviously all about security and how your grounding should. And it was really weird because literally as we started to get into that chakra, the base chakra, all the security of the studio was up, and I think we had an infestation of kind of rats. We had I think we got flooded. I think there was a bushfire as well that kind of happened. Do you know what I mean? It was all on. You know, that literally just stopped like the next road to where the studio was. Literally all the bush was just burnt. You know what I mean? Yeah, full ball. And then we went all the way up, and I remember getting to heart chakra, and we were all the relationships in the kind of, we're all breaking up, and you know what I mean? It was all just like, you know, head stuff going on. When we got to third eye, we were all sort of like getting into psychological dramas and tripping each other out of like, you know, mistrust and all that kind of thing going on. Do you know what I mean? And then I think by the time I got to Crown, it was like, you know, I just escaped through my pineal gland, and I was like, out there. And but it was a great record, and it was 20 years. It was 20 years, 22. When we did 2002, so 20 years ahead of its time. Now you've got albums left, right, and center. You go on YouTube, and it's all kind of, you know, you get your 528 hertz, you get your 438 hertz, you get your, you know, 888 hertz. All of that stuff happening now. We were working on those frequencies literally not before anyone else, because obviously the Indians kind of like were working on frequencies in, you know, 3000 BC, but we were the first to kind of put it together in that kind of way. Do you know what I mean? We were the first sort of like production crew to create a journey from the base to the crown and use individual archetypes. So djembes, we use kind of what did we go for? We had that like in the solar plexus, we had that driving kind of techno kind of trip thing going on. We had this beautiful soulful heart energy vibe with tabulas. We had drum and bass kind of energy for the throat, which is expression. We had a raga with this beautiful guy from Armenia come in and play zitar on the third eye. And then we had David Allen doing this glissando guitar on the, meanwhile we had all these like Buddhist Tibetan chanting going on. Yeah, beautiful, man. I remember doing when I did heart chakra as well, we worked with this girl who was sang sort of like Middle Eastern kind of flavors. And I had this, I remember doing the session with her, and heart can be happy and we can also be sad as well. And I had this inclination to kind of go, I wanted to take her from basically doing a lament vocal to a joyful vocal. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we had this lament happening to shadow heart, and then the joy of the heart with the change of vocal vibration. So everything was moving in a really deep multi-dimensional level on that record, and I don't think it's been beaten in terms of sort of like its intention, you know, really. And it never really got released properly because we ended up kind of with a few, shall we say, some business challenges at the end of it. You know what I mean? But it was all good. I mean, the record stands for itself. I put out an edited version of it on my record label in 2004, and people generally really love it. I've taken it off. I probably, once I've spoken to Orlando again, I might well remaster and re-release it at some point, because it is a beautiful record, man. It's a beautiful record. It's called
I've noticed you've always gone with the flow. You've always lived in the moment and just go with it. Whatever feels good, you just go along with it. Did you ever think you would end up in Byron Bay doing that?
Well, I was in Byron in 96 or 97, and I didn't, if I'm honest with you, I was so hell-bent on working. I remember getting to Byron and digging it, obviously surfing and this, that, and the other. But I was working for Festival Records right at the time, and they called me back. I literally got there. I was there for about 4 days, and my girlfriend at the time was working in Byron. So obviously she hadn't seen me for ages, because I've been in this studio sort of in Newtown doing lots of different production stuff, this, that, and the other. And I remember getting there, and it just sort of blows my mind a little bit of how work orientated I was, because I got there, I had about 4 days R&R. I get a phone call from the label saying, we've got a remix, we need you to get back to Sydney like ASAP. And I literally just kissed my girlfriend goodbye and went straight back in the studio and did, I think it was Frankie Goes to Hollywood remix for Two Tribes, which was then used for the Super League, which was a big kind of rugby kind of thing going on. But, you know, it was like I was so like focused on my work and working that I literally, you know, and Byron's a paradise, isn't it? It's a paradise, you know. But I'd much rather get back to Sydney and get back in the studio and work, because that's just the way I've rolled all these years, you know what I mean? And I've always been passionate about my work, and there was I think we did quite a good remix on that. I remember doing a really good remix on that. Lots of funny stories alongside that as well. But so
I can just imagine.
Lots of Lots of very good
And
memories.
also your music.
Huh?
Yeah, I could just imagine because Byron Bay is still very big, like for like spirituality wise and everything. It's still very big, Byron Bay. Everyone goes there.
I'm gonna be honest with you though. I think there's a lot of fakes up there, man.
Oh, really?
I
You
think there's a
speak
lot
the
of
truth.
fakes.
I haven't been. I've been once, I think, just for a couple of days. I didn't get a chance to see. I went for a wedding, so I didn't get a
It's,
chance to see it much.
it's also
Yeah.
it's ley lines up that way. So there's ley lines, so it's really punchy and powerful. The Aboriginals, because I always dig into what the Aboriginals kind of thought on them, you know, and how they kind of processed things. And they wouldn't stay in Byron. They used to live. They would go out to Mullumbimby, and they would hang in
Oh,
Mullumbimby. And then you've got Mount Wollumben, which is Mount Warning, and that was one of their sacred kind of initiation sites. You've got a sacred Wollumben is a sacred male initiating site, and then you've got, I think this is another one which is a female one. Mount Warning, yeah, interesting space, man. I climbed up that mountain. That's an 8.8 kilometer hike all the way up to the top of that mountain. Amazing place. What a view right across the whole of New South Wales, man. It is mind blowing. But Byron, they wouldn't stay in Byron. They'd go and fish, and they would get out. And the reason why is the ley lines are very, very choppy. So you'll have two experiences in Byron. You'll either have a very full on drug fueled alcohol, sex, rock and roll, whatever it is, or you'll have that kind of epiphany vibration. But then you've got to be careful that the traps of that spiritual kind of world isn't an illusion. That, you know, a lot of kind of people wandering around with their white garments on, kind of going, you know, I'm so holy. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, you know, I'm so sort of enlightened, and you sort of, I remember sort of going. I remember just looking at people at that point, I think in 2002 when I was doing the album, going, yeah, I don't really see you being that real. I don't see, a lot of people talk the talk, but don't really walk the walk. Do you know what I mean? And I'll always put my cards on the table and say, I think you're blagging, man. I think you're blagging. I don't think you're really being completely honest about your spiritual vibration, because you know what? You're quite happy to put it in a bottle and sell it. You know what I mean? And I don't see your integrity being, like, for instance, like, I think a lot of those people are basically, is they're in it for the buck. It's
oh,
not there,
okay.
not there for the love. They're there for
Yeah.
they're there for them to come and have a sesh with me, man. Do you know what I mean? And you know, I'll give you the enlightenment for $100. You know what I'm saying? It's the classic guru kind of bullshit that I think is very prevalent. And you know what? Anyone that thinks that I'm talking shit, come and have a chat with me, man, and I'll talk to you about them. Let's see who's real and who isn't real. Because
Yeah,
I'm,
but
you know,
there's a lot of, as they call them, false prophets. There's a lot of false prophets
like
all around the world. You just got to
listening
be
to.
aware.
If anyone's listening to this from Byron that dresses up in their white garments and runs around festivals giving it the large, come and talk to me, man. Come and talk to me, and I'll see who's real and who isn't real. So I've got no problem. I've got no problem in
Yeah,
saying what I'm saying, because I know that I'm speaking the truth from
just speaking
experience.
the truth.
So
Yeah,
I
just
think
speaking
that
the truth. Yeah.
there's a lot of charlatans, man, and I'm not saying that I'm holier than thou. I've got problems, I've got issues that I'm trying to deal with. I'm human, but I'm not going to dress up in white garments and run around festivals trying to sell you enlightenment, because that's not what I do, man. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just not what I do.
Yeah.
So, and I find that the worst of. I'd rather hang out with somebody that talks about football than somebody that talks about spirituality and puts it in a bottle and tries to sell it to you and pretend it's their tip. Do you understand me? They're the
Yeah.
worst. They've actually read
Yeah.
all those books. They know. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like you kind of like seeing through a priest. They know.
Yeah.
They
False
know
prophet.
what.
Yeah.
You know, when Jesus says, like, forgive them for they know not what they do. I'm sorry, Jesus, but I disagree with you, because actually you can't forgive them because they know what they do. Do you understand what I'm trying to say there? I'm not trying to go against what, that's a beautiful thing to have said, but there's a lot of people, and I bet you, if we would had a time machine and we went back to the crucifixion, I bet there was a lot of people there that knew exactly what they were doing when they crucified Christ. Do you understand me? And those people haven't disappeared. That energy's been handed down and handed down. Anytime you go against the grain, you get crucified, and they know exactly what they're doing. So I've got to that point, and do you know what? I meditate on that every day. That whole, when Jesus says that, forgive them, Lord, for what they know not what to do. And you know what? I constantly go back to Jesus and I pray and I say, Jesus, you are a better, obviously greater understanding than I have got, because I struggle, because from where I'm looking, those people know exactly what they're doing when they stab you in the back. They are consciously doing that. And I find so I'm going to be completely honest, I find it difficult to forgive that behavior. I really do. It makes me angry. It makes me angry. I'm not,
I think everyone,
if
I
Jesus
think
takes,
everyone,
if
yeah, in their own way. I think everyone deals with it in their own way. I'm a big forgiver. I learned to forgive, and I just pray for them so they can see the light. You know.
of
So
course,
yeah,
it's a fine line, you know, Anastasia. Everything's a fine line. There's no real kind of like, there's no kind of like absolutes in this situation. There's always a bit of a grey line. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, not everybody's kind of got evil running through them. Not everybody's got great running through or good running through them. We're an amalgamation of a lot of things. But what I'm trying to say to you is, when people come up to me and try and, you know, present themselves as some guru, I don't dig it. I would rather hang out with somebody that's, as I say, who is real, has a schooner, talks about a bit of football, because they're being more real about themselves than somebody that presents themselves as some sort of like highly evolved priest. That's what I'm saying, man. And I know that.
I think you've lived and you've seen a lot too.
Well, I should think so. I should hope so. Do you know what I mean? I should hope.
No, you have, because you're speaking through experience, what you've seen. Some people probably haven't even seen all that. But I love the way that with your music, you have, I call it silent messages, like your music, like when people get to know it, like there's messages in there, which I really love.
Yeah, you know what? Again, sort of, you know, I've said to you, things are multidimensional, and life is multidimensional. There's no real sort of like, where does grey begin and sort of white begin? There's no, do you know what I mean? It's that kind of boundary between sort of, nothing is like, you could sort of show me a white card, but then I'll show, but there's pigments of kind of like other colors within that framework, so it can't be completely white. You understand what I'm saying? It's like nothing is as an absolute in life. So where there's those kind of anomalies, that's where you can get into the core of it and then dig within it, and then sort of find that there is these multi dimensions. I think when you see things as absolutes, you're blank screening. You're saying, oh, that's just white, or that's black, or that's the sea, or that's the sky. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's multi levels behind that. There's molecules that are working within that framework, or that's a bit of wood that you're looking at. You know, that everything's moving and changing, so nothing's absolute. So I just take that approach with what I do creatively, that I just create multi-dimensional levels, which it gives you options to maybe dive into, if you want to dive into the lyrical aspects of it, you know, if you want to dive into the musical levels of it. And you know, it's entire, I leave it up to you. I'm not preaching to you. I'm not even saying to you anything I'm saying that people don't agree with. You do not have to agree with me. I don't need you to agree with me. I'm not looking for you to like me or dig what I do. It doesn't matter to me whether you dig what I say or not. I've got no skin in the game on that level. Do you know what I mean? If you dig it, you dig it. If you don't, you don't. And that's the same with the music. If you dig it, you dig it. If you don't, I don't care. I just generally don't care, because you can go and listen to the Foo Fighters if you don't like what I do, or you can go and listen to some other corporate rock and roll band that you think's going to give you the answer, you know. But I do try with everything I've done, all the way back to when I got signed to EMI at 19. And the first record we put out was a track called Reach Out, right? Now, most dance records don't really deal with any other lyric than sort of like, let's get high, let's have sex, do you know what I mean? Or if you're lucky, right, you'll get, you know, even if you're lucky, you're not going to get much depth. But here's a songwriter that kind of like goes, right, so I'm writing this tune, and it was a summer, and I was sitting in East London in a park with my girlfriend. It was a beautiful day, and I was writing this lyric for this track, and I just saw, you know, us basically being held back from sort of like our greatness. And it was just about basically sort of like getting over these kind of hurdles and reaching out for the light, right? And so I penned this, you know, this lyric, do you know what I mean? And it all just came out literally that afternoon. And I ran back into the flat, and the flat overlooked Beckton District Park and the city airport. It was a really, right in the middle of East London, right? If you've ever seen the film Full Metal Jacket, they used to film in the gasworks. That's really quite where it is, but it's in a good spot. Anyway, so I ran back in the flat, and I've got the tape recorder, and I'm playing back the backing track, and I'm writing down the vocals, and I'm singing over the top of it. And you know, so but there's a real depthful lyric, right? We put this record out. Me and a guy called Joey Massavia is again, you know, we had our moments, but he generally brilliant guy, you know. And we were young, man. We like, you know, but we were just working on such a good vibration at that point, you know. And anyway, we hook up, and I go, got the vibe, got the lyric. He comes down, I sing it to him. He's like, mate, that's amazing, right? So we book a studio down in Soho, in Kingley Street, just off the back of Regent Street, right? And Soul to Soul and all those guys use this studio, brilliant little studio in Kingley Street. Probably doesn't exist now, but it did at that point. Anyway, so we're in there, and I'm laying this vocal down, and it's buzzing, and we're going like, and Joey's like, I can't believe this, the vocals, the song, and it's all coming together, and it's a hit record, right? It's a hit. It was a hit for us. And we put it out, and Joey was really clever on putting on sort of just getting white labels out at that point, because it was again like not everybody did that, right? So he goes, right, we're going to do a company up, real switched on. We set this company up, State of Mind Recordings, right? You know, this is 1991, right? We're 19 years old, 21, right? So we get this white label pressed up. We've gone up, we've done the mastering, we've done the editing, we've done the remixes. We stick it all, and he goes, all we're going to do is we're going to stick the title on and a phone number, right? So we do this, and then we press up 1,000 copies. Then we bang it out to this distribution company called Movement Soul, and they put it out, and it goes #1, right? Like in all these independent charts, like independent soul charts, independent dance charts, blah, 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 blah. And suddenly the phone starts ringing, right? And it's EMI on the phone, right? And we're going, but previously to that, we had a company called Big Life, and Jazz Summers was like, Jazz Summers broke Wham, for Christ's sake, right? He broke Wham in China with like Simon Napier Bell. Made history. This guy made history, right? He had Lisa Stansfield, like that was his kind of. Do you remember Lisa Stansfield? Loads of stuff. He was a real maverick. He's a maverick, old school gangstery type kind of maverick dude, but brilliant. So anyway, he wants this track. So we've got like 4 or 5. We had 3. I think we had 4 major record companies all basically wanting to score this record to assign us as an act, right? Just on that one thing, putting a stamp, phone, boom, boom, boom. So anyway, we're in a studio for Big Life, Lisa Stansfield's sort of management company, and we're in a beautiful studio in Wood Green, and it's like the old SSL desks, like proper studio. And we're sitting there, like I say, and the phone goes, right? So it's EMI, and they want us to come in for a meeting. So we've run down to Bramley Road, which is Ladbroke Grove, neck of the woods. Over, you know, Notting Hill. You might have seen the film Notting Hill. Right, that's there. Yeah, it's in that neck of the woods, right? So we're rocking over there, and they, you know, and it was amazing because we go up the stairs for this meeting, and you've got like all these records that as kids we love, like from Madness to Specials, Debbie Harry, all the Blondie stuff. Do you know what I mean? You know, all that kind of. I met Debbie Harry up there actually afterwards. It was quite cool, and loads of other Pop Will Eat Itself. There was loads of great kind of great bands happening at that point in time. And anyway, they offer this deal, and there's like, I think there was 10 grand on the table. Basically, it was £10,000, literally. Like to a 19-year-old, £10,000 is a lot of money, right? So we basically were just going, we've just got to do this, dude. You know what I mean? We've got to do this deal. So we signed this deal. Do you know what I mean? And you know, we put this record out, and it did really, really well, and it sort of like set us up as a kind of vibe. And you know, we sort of sail through the sort of 90s really. He went his separate ways after, long story short, but you know, as I say, it was just it was an entry into where the business was. So I kind of learned how to do things from being in that situation and working with some very, very cool top end people like Paul Waller, you know, who'd worked with Misha Paris and Whitney Houston and all those kind of big names. and they taught me basically Paul Waller and Chris Woods, who had Brand New Heavies. They did the Brand New Heavies together. They were just incredible. So I learned my chops basically just watching people in studios that really knew how to get around the studio. So by the time I got out to Australia in sort of 96, 97, I was pretty on my game, because I'd had that. Yeah, so I knew what I was doing. I came in, and that's why I was getting all the work. I was cleaning up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
What about, do you have much rejection along the way, Dar Ra?
yeah, of course. I mean, of course. I think, you know what, the strange thing is when you're, like for instance, when that deal went sour with EMI, and I got a deal with Warner Brothers straight after that. Do you understand what I mean? So deals were, yeah, you know what I mean? I could walk out of one deal in the 90s and get a deal like that, you know what I'm saying? By the time I got back from Australia, I felt things were changing. By 2000, sort of things were changing, and I thought, I've got two choices. I can wait for a record deal, or I can set my own label up. So I set my own record label up, Kusha Deep. And again, sort of drawing on the sort of vibe that Joey had taught me, because Joey taught me a lot, you know what I mean, about how to sort of like set labels up and how to run things and running accounts and this, that, and the other. He was really switched on guy. And he went off to do some amazing things. He did like Aretha Franklin, he did like Whitney remixes. You name it, he was buzzing on it, and he's still a big name. He mentioned Joey Massavia. I mean, we haven't spoken since, unfortunately. I'd love to give him a hug, man, and say, man, they were good days, you know what I'm saying? But it just hasn't really happened, unfortunately. But I do wish him all the best. I know we did have a bit of a major fallout at the time, but I'd hold. No, of course, it's a long time ago. Still, I wish the guy all the love, you know what I mean? And I know that he's still active, making some really good stuff. So, and I still play his records on my radio show. That's the thing, I always go, this is Joe. Da, 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 da. So I don't hold grudges, man. Do you know what I'm saying? Life's too short. But anyway, so right. Deep, I've been running Kusha Deep Records pretty much from sort of early 2000s up until now. I've put out quite a few tunes. I've done, I've had some good selling tracks. I've done lots of licensing deals in Hollywood on various different tracks. And I sit in front of you now, just still pumping, still ready to kind of put the next EP out, and it's just something that I do because I love it, for better or for worse, man. Do you know what I'm saying?
Good on you. You're enjoying what you're doing. There's nothing more rewarding than doing what you love. And you also save animals too.
I think animals save me. I think animals save me, man.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough.
The unconditional love. They're beautiful.
I think if you do not have animals in your life, you are in. What the hell are you doing? Do you know what I mean? You can't live your existence without having an animal in your life, unless it's like you're living in a flat in East London but even that, have a goldfish or something. Just have something that you can love. You know what I'm saying? Because it actually stops you being self-absorbed. Like I have to put my German
I've got a little chihuahua, and I've had her for 11 years. I can't imagine my life without her. I can't imagine my life without her. They're just incredible animals.
And if you've got a little bit of space and you can't, like we've got rescued chickens, we've got one of my GSDs that's rescued. We've got a rescue horse. We did have 2 rescue horses. We've got 3 horses, and one we did have 5. But yeah, and 3 of those were actually rescued. No, 2 of them were rescued. We've got, as I say, sort of rescue cats. We've got 2 rescue cats here. So yeah, wherever we can do. Mika had she's a beautiful girl, German Shepherd. She had a hard start. And people don't understand sometimes that animals have had a hard start, so they take a bit. Sometimes they never adjust to human beings. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard, but a lot of people just don't understand. They don't want to understand because there's a problem. They just want to get rid of it. So, but I've come to the party. I've got this amazing horse. Oh, this horse. He's called Hazlitt. He's what they call a standard bred. He's a piebald, so he's black and white. He's the most beautiful guy you've ever seen. He looks like an Apache horse.
You have to send me a photo.
Yeah,
you have to send me a photo.
He's had a hard start. He's had a very tumultuous sort of 7 years or whatever, however long we've had him for, and it's been a real amazing sort of journey, and he's taught me a lot about patience and not. It's so easy. Your human reaction when you're not getting what you want is to kind of go, ah. Do you know what I'm saying? And actually, that doesn't work for a horse. Do you know what I'm saying? Because when you go, rah, they go, ah. What are you doing? You crazy fool. You know what I mean? And so I have to go. And it's so easy because that's part of our trigger as human beings. We're reactive. We're reacting all the time, and we've got to actually stop just being reactive and actually get into the moment, and then being almost like kind of like non-reactive, and actually dealing with the situation in a non-reactive way. Do you understand what I mean by that? It's a very sort of fine, subtle.
Being present, being present, being
You know,
present.
yeah,
Being
and it's also coming with the right. So when you use your breath, for instance, in a situation like, so, okay, so I've got this another horse called Alfie. He's an amazing horse. He's a grey Irish draft. And recently he's been kind of, he was injured for a little while, just out of the blue injury, all the way through the summer. So again, I was like, oh, I can't believe it, because I was gearing him up to do some jumping with him this summer. Long story short, he started to get these really weird sort of neuroses going on. So, for instance, like, you know, he doesn't want to go out on the, you know, and actually hack out. There's something weird going on. He pulled his shoe off the other day, you know, and I'm like, ugh! Do you know what I mean? Oh, what are you doing? You can get up and down a road. What's the matter with you? But I've got to, you know, I'm having to go, all right, take a deep breath now. Work out why is he doing that? What's happening here? And okay, in that instance, I've got to dismount. I've got to get off him, and I've got to kind of then lead him and say, look, there's nothing to worry about. But then at the same time, you don't want to overdo it, because then you'll get him into a false sense of security, because you want to be kind of riding. So anyway, he was in a school, I think it was on Friday, and there's two other horses on the hill, and they've got an electric fence. Well, one of the horses goes into the electric fence, and you hear this, obviously, because it's just set off, and he bolts off. And I'm doing like a bit, I think we were doing some canter. No, I was doing some trot work, some flat work, basically. And as soon as he hears that, he just does a sort of almost like a total kind of plant. And I'm like, and he won't move forward and he won't move back. And I'm like, oh, for sake, what is the matter with you? Come on. Do you know what I mean? So it'd be very easy for me to go, get on. Do you know what I mean? And do all that pushy. But actually, the better thing to do is actually just take a deep breath and allow him to process, give him a bit of time, turn him round in the other direction, get his confidence somewhere else, and then bring him. Do you see what I'm saying? Then rather than go, come on, you know, which is a lot of what people will do. So I think what I'm trying to say to you, like, go beyond the reactive, take the breath.
That's like human.
Yeah, take
human
the
breath. The same.
Then your mind is then kind of slowed down enough to be able to deal with it in a non-reactive way. Do you understand me? Now, if you do that for like, you can do that in your everyday situation, i.e. somebody cuts you up when you're trying to get to you know, somebody cuts you up because you've just gone past the roundabout or something, or whatever it is, you know, and you go, you beep, you know what I mean? Rather than that, you can actually go, take a deep breath, let that energy go. What happens when you meet energy on energy, if you look at that whole sort of Tai Chi kind of like flow, you know, that just does that. But if you do that, you allow the energy to kind of go past you, then you've got options to either turn on it if you need to defend yourself, or you move on. Do you see what I'm saying? But if you're just doing that, what are you doing? You've stopped your movement forward. So it's better to move out of the way of that object and allow it to dissipate, and then you can counterattack, or you can, as I say, move on. And that's non-reactive thinking.
I agree. Our students can learn from that one big time.
Yeah, man, absolutely. With Tai Chi, man, you need to be on the beach doing that. Where's your nearest beach, Anastasia?
Probably Brighton. I think the nearest one, yeah, from where I am at the moment. Yeah.
I know. That's really south, isn't it? South Sydney.
I'm not sure which way. I think you probably know Sydney better than me.
I'm
not quite sure.
Not far from Botany Bay.
Yeah. It's before Botany Bay. It's Brighton, and you go. Yeah, I'll say you do know. You're familiar. My goodness, I'm surprised.
I shot a video in Botany Bay for a track called Super Hyper Real. I'll show it to you, man. It's right in Botany Bay. Yeah, it's you know that's where Christopher Columbus first landed.
Yeah, oh my gosh, you are so good. You know your history too. Impressive.
We had a laugh.
You
I don't think that's a
trigger
good
me by
You know what? I don't think that's.
sorry.
I don't know if that Christopher Columbus was a good thing or no. Is it Christopher Columbus? It was Captain Cook rather. It was Captain Cook that landed there first. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you know the Aboriginals were tracking Captain Cook all the way from the south coast, all the way up to all the tribes were basically saying there's a ship basically coming up the sail, and so each tribe was letting the next tribe know that there was an issue coming through, and then they landed. They let them land at sort of. At Botany Bay. I don't think there was too much interaction at that point, but they allowed them to move on. And then the next time they got into trouble at Cape Tribulation, and they ran aground, and they came in through what is now the Cape Trib. I think the river is called Cape Tribulation as you go into Cooktown. Have you been up to Cooktown? You know Cooktown?
Oh
yeah. Have you never been to Cooktown?
Dar Ra, I've got a real good history lesson from you today.
So what happens?
Amazing, my God.
They run aground because you know the barrier reef up there is it's quite shallow, and they came in too close, and the Endeavour was the ship that Captain Cook was sailing up the river with. Ran into the reef and got ripped up, and they had to go into what is now I think Cape Trib River into Cooktown to kind of try and find some repairs to repair the ship, and that's when they first met the first Aboriginal tribe who actually tried to help them to get back on track, and then when they were invited back onto the ship, they saw that the British sailors had been stealing turtles to feed on later, right? Well, that's not done in Aboriginal society, if you like. And there was a problem because they said you can't take those; they're sacred animals. You know, you can't take them. So there was a big fight between the British and the Aboriginals. That was the first real sort of skirmish. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone out there is listening to this, but that's what I heard when I was up there. And so yeah, so it ended sort of the British Navy basically managed to get away with you know whatever they got away with, and they got back to base. And they came back to England, I think. And then when he came out the second time, he tried to pull the same stunt, went to Fiji, and the Fijians killed him, Captain Cook. They literally, as he went back to the boats, they threw a spear, hit him straight in the back and killed him. So he died in Fiji. But look, you know, you can go into sort of, you know, for me, I used to cry a lot about how Aboriginals were treated in Australia, you know what I'm saying? But it seemed to sort of, no one really cared that much, you know what I'm saying? I was very sort of like disappointed with some of the attitudes that I heard towards Aboriginal people, regardless of where they are. You know, the British. I'm not kind of doing the class because it's very fashionable now to have a go at colonialism, but there was terrible things done to Aboriginal people. It was genocide, nothing short. Like people have a go at Adolf Hitler and the Germans, right? You want to see what the British did in Australia? Just have a look at what they did there. It's just it was so destructive and so heartbreaking to the point where, like, you know, there's tribes I think up in just north of Murwillumbah,
Yeah, Murwillumbah.
and there was tribes up there that they basically kind of started to get into using flour, right? So they were giving them flour and getting them used to using flour to cook with, and you know what? Once they got them into it, you know what they started doing? Poisoning it. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they killed the whole tribe off by poisoning the flour. You know, that's what I'm talking about, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, not a lot of Australians really. A lot of Australians I met as well are all very much into native Red Indian stuff. Like they're all sort of, they've all got their I'm walking bear and all that kind of stuff going on, and they're doing their sort of they've never even been to America, right? But they're running around going like, you know, I'm running bee or more, all this kind of ceremony nonsense that I saw over there. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, why are you practicing native Red Indian stuff when you've got like Aboriginal, like the oldest people or some of the oldest tribes in the world, and you're not recognizing the blue magic of Australia? the true blue magic of kind of like the Aboriginals, yet you're kind of, that's how far lost a lot of those people who I thought were supposedly on their game. They're practicing something that on their ground, you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy. You know, it's crazy. It's like it's total like non-seeing kind of what was there originally. And I've got Aboriginal friends, man, do you know what I'm saying? Or half Aboriginal friends that I work with, a guy called Pixie and Simon, who are half Aboriginal, who are absolutely lovers, brothers, man. Do you know what I mean? They are like brothers to me. And, you know, and it's sad because they told me a lot of stories about stuff that had gone on there, like massacres, man. All right, here's one for you. Go down to George Street, the bomb of George, in the CBD. You go all the way through George Street, you know, you go past all the big offices, all the big kind of big glass offices, and you'll get to right at the end of it. I don't know if it's you know, if it's not been developed. And right at the end of it, if you're switched on, meditate for a minute, and I'll tell you now, you'll feel the darkest energy that you've ever felt, because there is a massacre at the bottom there, and you can feel it. And in Wollongbar as well, I felt it there. Balmain, you know Balmain? Do you know Balmain?
Yeah.
Do you know what they used to do? You know what they used to do in Balmain? They used to throw Aboriginals in the harbour, and they used to bet on how quickly they'd be eaten by sharks. That's what they used to do. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, not good vibes, man. A lot of Australia is built on genocide. And I look again, any kind of like Australian kind of blue blood Aussies who want to kind of have a go at me, bring it on, because I'll just say, well, look, actually, at the end of the day, sort of like, I'm just giving you the facts of what went down. It's up to you whether you respect that or not. It's not down to me. I'm not, you know, I just feel for the Aboriginals. And I used to see those kind of like I hear those stories, and it'd break my heart. Absolutely break my heart. And I'd go to places with Simon, and particularly Simon, and he'd say, can you feel that? And I'd be like, I can, man. You know what I mean? He goes, you know what? There was a massive massacre here. And I'd be like, oh, mate, you could really feel it. I guarantee you go up there with anyone that's psychically switched on, man, they won't be able to handle it, because it's the energy is like, it's full on. It's full on. It would be like being in an episode of Stranger Things. You know what I mean? It's just colossal.
You actually experience quite a bit of Australia. You probably know Australia more than I do. God bless you. But on a lighter note, if you had a message, Dar Ra, to deliver to the world today, what would that message be to all the viewers out there and everyone looking and listening?
Seek the truth and spread love. End of.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying? Doesn't get any more complicated than that.
No. Yeah. All right, then, Dar Ra, thank you so much for being. Yeah, go on. You there?
Let me just finish up. If I've upset anybody or offended anybody, you know, I'm not. It's just the truth. If you can't handle the truth, man, sorry, I can't deal with. I can't put you in cotton wool, man. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sorry if it's offended you, but you know, you're just gonna have to meditate on the truth a bit more. That's all I'll say, man.
You're just speaking your truth, and that's fine. That's why the platform's here, for us to speak our truth. And you know what? Sometimes the truth does hurt, you know, so, it's
about love, and it's about love. It's about being truthful and love. And, you know, go to a reservation, get out. No, I've been lucky enough to sort of meet people from reservations and just hang out and talk, you know what I mean? And go and spend some time on a reservation.
Just listen. Yeah.
You know, don't judge them when they're hanging about, sort of drunk. You know, and you look at them and go, oh, you know, look at them drunk or whatever. You know, they are like that because that's the way things rolled for them, unfortunately, and they should be looked after rather than sort of ridiculed. Do you know what I'm saying? So they're beautiful people, man. They're very, very deep people, but there's a lot of hurt there, man. A lot. It's not easy, but you know. Most Australians that I've met.
It's all around the world. It's all around the world.
Of course. Orlando.
Everywhere.
You know, the cat I told you about in Byron, he's now living in Brizzy, man. Do you know what I mean? He was in, man. He married an Aboriginal girl. He married an Aboriginal girl, man. So I was there kind of hanging out. I was lucky enough to be able to hang out with Aboriginal people and and just feel the love, you know what I'm saying? They're beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people. You know what I'm saying? And
love is powerful. Love is powerful. And love is unity, and love is peace, and love is joy, and love is happiness. Love represents a lot of things.
Here's one.
But
Here's
anyway.
one. So you'd see an Aboriginal playing a didgeridoo, and he'd say, and then he'd see maybe somebody sort of like playing a didgeridoo, and he'd say, "Didgeridoo, mate, didgeridoo," you know, because you're just not doing it right. You know what I mean? I just love the way sort of Aboriginal sort of sense. You didgeridoo, mate, didgeridoo, just brilliant. I love those people,
Have
man.
you played a didgeridoo? Have you played a didgeridoo?
Yeah, of course I have.
Oh, good.
You got to get your circular breathing.
Excellent.
Yeah, you got to get your circular breathing. I did have one, but again, you know, it's a beautiful instrument. But look, we'll close on this. Think about the didgeridoo, right? What does that do? The didgeridoo basically creates a tone for you to meditate to. It's a drone, just like you find in Indian music, right? It's a drone which allows the tribe to go into trance. And when they went into trance, then they would be able to get visions. And they call it, what do they call it? It's like the dreaming. They call it the dreaming. I think that's what they call it, the dreaming. And that's what the dreaming is, going into their higher self, right? So they'll do the trance, they'll do the dreaming, and then they get the insights in order to do what they need to do. You know, if you learn more about from where Aboriginals are, like for instance, they would do controlled burn-offs in the bush, and that burn-off would be a way of them hunting, and it would burn off all the old stuff. So you wouldn't get those bushfires. They didn't log like Western people did. Why have you got bushfires that are out of control? Because all the natural fire breakers have been taken out. So now you've got bushfires that just spread for like there was bushfires going on up in Cairns for like 2 years. You could smell the burning, man, as you drove into the town, because people haven't fought. You go to Tablelands, look at the Tablelands, man. Tablelands has been completely gutted. There's no trees up there. Why? They thought, we're going to completely level that, take all the rainforests out, and we'll turn it into farmland. And they realized that the sun was so hot, there was no tree cover, that they couldn't use the land. So what have you got? Wasteland now. The Aboriginals didn't do that. They didn't need to. Do you know what I'm saying? Everything was intact. Everything was intact. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, so anyway, you can learn a lot from the Aboriginals. If you know, all around the world, man, those people should be just held as heroes, and they should be your national heroes. They should be playing in your cricket teams. They should be they should be sort of heralded like in government. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there is some cool Aboriginal people coming through. There was a brilliant one I saw the other day. I'll close on this, right? I promise you I'll close on this. She was amazing. So she's obviously.
Dar Ra, you've taken over the show today.
Right. This is beautiful though, man. So she comes in and they wanted to praise the Queen or whatever it was. Do you know what I mean? And they wanted to read out this whole "I pledge allegiance to the Queen," and she's like, "I ain't saying that. I ain't saying that." Do you know what I mean? And they were like, "Mrs. Speaker, you must say this." And she said, "I know." And she was doing it. And then she mumbled the Queen. Do you know what I mean? She went, "I hereby said," blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I mean? She was just adamant. She wasn't going to sort of do anything to the crown. And I thought, you know what? Full respect to you, sister. You're a lot of people go, "Oh, look at how disrespectful." But no, she's been truthful to herself, dude. Because that is the way forward. You know, beautiful. Yeah. There's some beautiful energy.
Yeah, the way forward is the truth. Speaking the truth.
Speak the truth and spread the truth, baby.
And be authentic and be real within yourself as well. Be true to you as well. Yeah.
Do you know what? If you can't wake up and look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm improving every day, you know, and I follow the way of the truth, or the way of God, or the way of Jesus, then you're kind of like, you know, I'd say you're probably stumbling about in the dark a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I think anyone that's not kind of like, for me, I say anyone, and you can't sort of put your kind of vibe on any other person. It's up to them. But I would be really worried if I was not following a spiritual path, because I think that's all we've got. You know, politics, nothing will save you on this planet other than your spiritual connection.
That is true. I agree with that one.
Anyway, you've been amazing.
I thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show today. We could talk for hours, seriously, but I wish you all the best. And we'll be talking anyway. We'll be talking to each other still after this interview, but take care. All the best. And we're signing. Sorry?
said you brought the sunshine out. It's been raining up until the moment we started talking.
Oh, there you
So
go.
now
There you go.
the
All right,
sunshine.
then, Sydney sunshine. Sending you so much love from Australia. Signing off for now from the talk show Angel on the Verkos show.
And big love to
See
all
ya.
those blue bloods out there, mate.
All right, big love to everyone in England,
Yeah, take
London,
care.
everywhere. Bye. Love you. Bye.
Pleasure. Take care. Bye.
You take it.